so Elizabeth Holmes obviously is the founder of Theranos or Theranos. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. People pronounce it different ways. And so what she said was that she had this amazing device. It was a revolutionary device, and with just one pinprick of blood, it could do this huge array of blood tests on you. So, the same traditionally you'd need to have like a couple of vials of blood drawn out of you, but now she could do it with a pinprick with her device, which she called the Edison, and it was just hugely, just went ballistic. This story went all around the world. She was on all the magazines. She was on all, she was interviewed. She was TED talked. The whole thing. She kind of deliberately cosplayed as Steve Jobs. She had the same turtleneck jumper he had, and she would lower her voice to make it sound more masculine. So she would do this thing where she would just like look at you without blinking. So there was a kind of a lot of performance going on, but people totally fell for it. They wanted to believe in the story of Elizabeth Holmes. And it wasn't just the press and the media that brought up the story. Even more consequentially, it was investors. So people like Rupert Murdoch and the founders of the Walmart family, huge investors, backed her with millions and millions and millions of dollars. For Rupert Murdoch, it was the biggest investment he's ever made outside his own family of companies. And people like Henry Kissinger sat on her board of directors. So people risked their reputation. And the amazing thing about this was that almost none of them bothered to do any due diligence. So you would have thought if you were going to back this company with hundreds of millions of dollars, you'd go, so Elizabeth, show me this machine then. Can I see it? But they didn't. When I say they didn't, I don't mean everybody. Some of them did, which I think is really telling. So Google Ventures, I think it was Google Ventures, sent somebody out to have one of these blood tests, and they had 2 massive vials of blood drawn from their arm. So we're like, wait a minute, and so Google Ventures declined to invest because they'd actually bothered to test. But people like Murdoch and Kissinger and the Walmart family, these huge people, invested millions of dollars and their reputations with no due diligence. Because, in my analysis is that it's because they're just so desperate to believe in her story. And, this was in, I call it, we were in the girl boss era very much at the moment still. It was very much, the girl boss era back then too. And people were crying out for a female Steve Jobs. People were kind of sick of these tech bros. They're all men. We want a woman. And along comes Elizabeth Holmes, ticks all the boxes. She's very eloquent. She seems very smart. No doubt she is very smart. I don't doubt that for a moment. And so people just completely uncritically accepted her story. And, to the extent where her at one point her company was valued at $9 billion. So, as I say in the book, her machine was worthless. It didn't exist. But her story was worth $9 billion. And that's the power of storytelling. That's the power of storytelling that it can beguile even the wealthiest and the smartest people in America fall for the story when it's told well enough.
Do you have any other examples in history whereby a story such as that manipulated or influenced human perception?
Yeah, Jesus, look at the Nazis, the Nazi story of all of the problems that have befallen the German nation are the fault of the Jews. Therefore, the right thing to do is to eradicate them from society and the world. That's a story that lots of people fell for. Lots of very smart people fell for, in the middle of the last century. So people are always, people think in stories. They think in stories, and they believe in stories. Facts and data are kind of overrated as persuasive tools.
There's a quote that brings to life your book that I love, and it's: a story is a deal, the deal it makes with identity.
Yeah.
Why is storytelling and identity so synonymous?
Well, to understand that, you've got to understand the fact that story isn't just something that we tell each other. It's not something that we just watch on Netflix or it exists in the form of gossip or speeches that CEOs make. Story is how we live. Story is our experience of the world. So story isn't something that we tell. Story is something that we do. And when you think of your identity, what is your identity? Your identity is the character that you play in the story world, which is your life. So you and me, we are on one level a bag of meat and bones and blood. That's what we are, just like any other animal. But for humans, we're also this character that we play in the story world with this set of ideas about who we were, where we're going, how life works, what morality is, what we want. That's what a human being is. It's this kind of set of ideas that adds up to an identity. And so human beings are obsessed with their identity. Human beings, in lots of cases, value their identity more than they value their actual lives. All the time human beings choose identity over their life. When those terrorists flew the planes into the towers on 9/11, they were choosing identity, their reputation, their status, the status of their identity over life. That's what happens when people go to war. That's what happens when people die for the revolution. All throughout history, people do this. I mean, in the stories, I talk about smoking. Smoking is this crazy thing that only human beings would do. When I started smoking in the 90s, and I started smoking in the full knowledge that I was gonna get addicted to it. It's gonna cost me loads of money. It's gonna make me stink. But I still did it. Why do people take up smoking knowing that it's a bad idea on a million different levels? Because it makes them look a bit cool. Like smoking makes you look 8% cooler. So people who take up smoking are choosing, just a little bump to their identity, a little increase in status of their identity over their actual lives and their kind of wallets. So we're kind of nuts. It explains a lot of the craziness of human beings. We care extremely deeply. You can't really exaggerate the extent to which humans obsess over their identity and care about their identity. It's the most important thing to us.